just elaborate on exactly what the tender process is in construction?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So everything starts with a lead. So lead can be, as I've said earlier, generated by a phone call from an architect that we work with saying we've got this project coming up, or it can be coming through a more official source such as a government portal telling you about a particular project that's coming up. Uh, Typically, you then respond to that lead in a formal way. There are a number of different acronyms, PQQs, SQs, EOIs, but essentially you are confirming your interest and telling them why you think you're suitable to be chosen to go onto a tender list. Generally, a tender list is a short list of potential providers of that work service. We as a business try to stick to a tender list of about 4 people. There are tender lists that expand way beyond that. For obvious reasons, your chance of success lessens by every person you add on